Dear children, good morning. In our second session of Class 10 English class, we are continuing with the lesson Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. The third paragraph reads thus: On that lovely autumn day, I was accompanied by my daughter Janani. On the podium, Mr. D. Clerk was first sworn in as second deputy president. Then Thabo Mbeki was sworn in as first deputy president. When it was my turn, I pledged to obey and uphold the Constitution and to devote myself to the well-being of the Republic and its people. To the assembled guests and the watching world, I said. Now, in our previous session, we had seen that South Africa's first democratic non-racial government was placed in a new position of authority through formal oath-taking by its leaders in a usual ceremony. Nelson Mandela taking oath as president and others who would assist him in the functioning of the government. It was a democratic government, unlike the previous autocratic government of the minority white people. All the sections of the South African population, the whites, the majority blacks, and other colored people participated in the voting process in electing their representatives. And it was also non-racial in the sense that no particular race was given preference over the other. All the races were considered equal. All the races were given representation in government. Now the third paragraph says that lovely autumn day. It was a beautiful day. Autumn is a beautiful season, the third season, in fact, after spring and summer. John Keats, the English poetic genius, has described autumn as the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. The South African people's long struggle for freedom too has now borne fruit. So it was a lovely day, beautiful, bright and clear, and Nelson Mandela was accompanied by his daughter Janani, representative of the young generation of South Africa. It was as if the father, after a long struggle, was leading his child towards freedom and empowerment, free from the bondage of the past. On the podium, which is a small platform to stand on, Mr. D. Clerk was first administered the oath of office as second deputy president. He belonged to the minority white community of South Africa. In fact, he was the head of the previous white government. Then was sworn in Thabo Mbeki, one of the foremost leaders of the South African freedom struggle. He later on became the second president of South Africa after Nelson Mandela had completed his term in office as president. Thabo Mbeki was administered oath as the first deputy president. Then Mandela took oath. He pledged or solemnly promised to obey the Constitution of South Africa. That means all his actions as president would be governed by the provisions of the Constitution. He won't allow any personal prejudices to come in the way of his functioning. He won't be biased towards anybody. And he also promised to maintain or uphold the Constitution. In a sense, he was promising not to allow discrimination against anyone like the white rulers. He also promised to devote or employ all his energies in ensuring the health and happiness of the nation and its people. After taking oath, Mandela addressed or gave a speech in front of the assembled guests of world leaders and dignitaries, the African people, and all the people of the world who were watching the proceedings live on television. Mandela, in his speech, said thus: "Today, all of us do, by our presence here, confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. Confer here means to give or grant a degree or title to somebody, and glory means high fame and honor won by great achievements." Mandela was actually expressing his gratitude or thankfulness to the assembled world leaders and dignitaries for having come to South Africa to express their support and solidarity towards the South African nation in their moment of freedom from bondage. Their presence was a sort of guarantee that the liberty got by the African people would not be snatched away from them anymore. It would continue to prosper. Mandela describes the long 300 years of oppression and suppression of the blacks as an extraordinary human disaster. It was an unusual situation that caused great harm or damage to the people, and it also lasted for 3 centuries. This is a very long period indeed of human suffering. Mandela talks of putting aside all the pain, suffering, and bitterness so that everyone can contribute collectively to the birth of a new society free from discrimination, where everyone will have equal opportunities for growth, and all humanity will be proud of such a society. The second paragraph of his speech reads thus: "We, who were outlaws not so long ago, have today been given the rare privilege to be host to the nations of the world on our own soil. We thank all of our distinguished international guests for having come to take possession with the people of our country of what is, after all, a common victory for justice, for peace, for human dignity." In this paragraph, Mandela remarks that till some time back, the international community had boycotted the South African nation because of its policy of apartheid or discrimination on racial grounds. Many countries had broken off diplomatic relations with South Africa. But on that day, South Africa a new democratic country was getting the rare privilege, that is, a special right or advantage, to be host to the nations of the world. South Africa, earlier an outlaw nation, today had on its soil dignitaries and world leaders from more than 140 countries as distinguished guests. What a sea change! Mandela, speaking like a statesman or wise political leader, in a very humble and dignified manner, remarks that the victory of the South African people was a common victory for justice, for peace, for human dignity. He, in fact, dedicates the achievements of the South African people to the world community. He thanked the distinguished international guests for having come to share in the joy and jubilation of the people of his nation. Mandela then goes on to speak thus: We have at last achieved our political emancipation. We pledge ourselves to liberate all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. Nelson Mandela speaks that the black population and other colored people have achieved political freedom. They have now the freedom to take active part in the democratic process of electing representatives who will form the government. They have got voting rights now, which they were denied under the rule of the whites. Mandela solemnly promises to free his people from the bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination, so that the people can move ahead on the path of economic prosperity. They should all have equal opportunities and rights, both men and women, so that they can fulfill their dreams of a good, successful life, a life of achievement, something they have been denied for so long. Mandela solemnly promises never to let his beautiful land ever to again experience oppression, that is, injustice or cruelty of one human by another. Nelson Mandela wishes or asserts that the sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. The achievement being the freedom of the African people from oppression, discrimination, and indignity. Mandela prays for freedom to reign or prevail and prays to God to bless Africa. That's all for now. I'm giving you the meanings of some words. Apartheid. It means official government policy of racial segregation or separation, separating Europeans and non-Europeans. Historic means famous or important in history. Inaugurate means introduce a new public official or leader at a special ceremony. Example, inaugurate the president. Introduce, make somebody known formally to somebody else by giving the person's name or by giving each person's name to the other. Dignitary, person with high rank or position. Oppress, rule or treat somebody with continual injustice or cruelty. Jubilant, showing great happiness, especially because of a success. Dawned, begin to grow light. Pleasant, give pleasure to the mind, feelings, or senses. Enjoyable. Pleasantly is an adverb. Example is smile pleasantly. Emancipate, set somebody free, especially from political, legal, or social restrictions. Ceremony, formal act or series of formal acts performed on that public occasion. Formal, following accepted rules of behavior. Supremacy, position of the highest power, authority, or status. Install, place somebody in a new position of authority with the usual ceremony. The noun form of install is installation. Discriminate, treating a person or group differently, usually worse than others. Podium, a small platform to stand on. Sworn in is a phrasal verb. Introduce somebody officially or ceremonially to a new position, responsibility, etc., by getting him to swear or make a solemn promise or statement, an oath. Pledged, promised solemnly. Solemn means done, said, etc., in a serious and committed way after deep thought. That's all. Thank you.